opening with power and poise. Somewhere along the way, we've been taught that being alone is something to fear. That if you're alone, something must be missing. But let me tell you today, alone doesn't mean lonely. In fact, it might just be the most powerful place you ever stand. Because when you're alone, without the noise, the pressure, the expectations, that's when you hear the loudest voice, your own. We live in a world obsessed with connection. Social media, relationships, status updates. Everyone seems to be chasing the next partner, the next party, the next post. But here's the truth. If you don't know how to love your own company, no connection will ever feel whole. I've built parts of my life brick by brick. Not because I had everything figured out, but because I decided I was worth showing up for. I stopped waiting for someone to save me, complete me, or define me. And that's when life started feeling full. Being alone gave me time to dream unapologetically, to fail without judgment, to grow fiercely. And when you build a life that feels right for you, not for the world, you stop chasing love and start attracting it. So don't confuse solitude with sadness. Alone is a beautiful space where you meet your most authentic self, where you become your biggest fan, your loudest cheerleader, your boldest believer. Don't be afraid of standing alone. Be afraid of settling for half, lives just to avoid it. Because the truth is, you don't need to be completed. You already are. We often use the words alone and lonely interchangeably, but they are worlds apart. Being alone is a state of being. It simply means you are by yourself. But loneliness is a feeling, one that can creep in even when you're surrounded by 100 people. You can be in a crowded room, at a glamorous event, or even in a relationship, and still feel completely unseen. That's because loneliness isn't about proximity to others, it's about connection to yourself. We've been raised to believe that aloneness signals something broken. That if you're alone at a restaurant, if you're living solo, if you're taking that vacation by yourself, something must be missing. But let's flip that narrative. What if being alone isn't a lack, but a strength? What if it means you are self-sufficient, grounded, and fully comfortable in your own skin? There's nothing lonely about knowing who you are, enjoying your own company, and choosing your peace over noise. The problem is, we've romanticized the idea that being with someone, anyone, is better than being alone. That's where so many of us make compromises, shrinking ourselves to fit into relationships or friendships that don't honor us. But choosing solitude when the world tells you to cling to connection, that takes courage. That's where growth happens. That's where authenticity lives. Being alone allows you to ask the real questions. What do I want? Who am I when no one is watching? In solitude, you hear things differently. You begin to notice your inner rhythm. What energizes you? What drains you? What excites you in the quiet moments? You start living from intention, not reaction. And suddenly, you stop reaching for external validation because you've found something far more stable: self-trust. That's not loneliness. That's power. That's peace. That's the beginning of living for yourself, not for the highlight reel. So no, being alone doesn't mean you're lonely. It means you've made space. Space to breathe. Space to grow. Space to become. And when you fill that space with your own light, your own voice, your own dreams, you realize you were never missing anything to begin with. You were just waiting to meet yourself. The world will try to tell you who you are through expectations, opinions, roles, and labels. But the truth is, none of those things are your foundation. You are. Your strength, your choices, your resilience. That's the groundwork of the life you're building. It's easy to lean on relationships, careers, or social approval to define your worth, but those things shift, they evolve, they fade, they change. The only constant is you. And when you know that, you stop building your life on shaky ground. Think about it. If your happiness depends on someone else's presence, if your confidence comes only from applause, if your peace is tied to external success, what happens when those things are taken away? That's not stability, that's survival. But when you become your own source of strength, when you are rooted in who you are, not what you have, life becomes a lot less fragile. You stop clinging to things that aren't meant for you because you're no longer afraid of standing on your own. You don't have to wait for someone to choose you, to validate you, or to make you feel worthy. Choose yourself, validate yourself, love yourself in a way that sets the tone for how the world will treat you. That is what it means to be your own foundation, to be so secure in your identity that you're no longer moved by every storm, every rejection, every setback. You bend, but you don't break. You grow, but you never lose your root. And let's be honest, building yourself up takes time. It takes sitting with your insecurities, confronting your fears, and refusing to settle for a life that doesn't reflect your truth. It's not always glamorous. Sometimes it's ugly crying on the floor at 2 a.m., still choosing to show up the next day. But every time you pick yourself up, every time you speak your truth, every time you stand tall after being knocked down, you're pouring cement into your foundation. You're becoming unshakable. When your self-worth isn't tied to your relationship status, your job title, or your follower count, you become unstoppable. You no longer build castles in other people's sand. You build your own ground, brick by brick. That's not selfish. That's survival with style. That's the kind of foundation that doesn't crack under pressure. It rises with it. In the chaos of everyday life, clarity often gets drowned out. There's so much noise, people's opinions, social expectations, endless notifications, the pressure to keep performing. We move from one obligation to another, so wired into the world around us that we forget to check in with the one person who actually matters, ourselves. Solitude creates that space. It pulls you out of the noise and back into your own mind where real clarity begins. When you're alone, you're not performing. You're not filtering your thoughts to be palatable or polished. You're not wearing a mask to fit someone else's comfort zone. In solitude, you face the raw version of yourself, unedited, honest, and real. And while that can be uncomfortable at first, it's also the most freeing experience you can have because you start to ask yourself questions that actually matter. Am I happy? What do I want? What do I need to let go of? Those questions don't get answered in a room full of distractions. They're answered in stillness. Clarity doesn't come crashing in like lightning. It comes slowly, through long walks alone, through journaling when the world is asleep, through quiet mornings when your phone is on airplane mode and your mind isn't pulled in 5 directions. In solitude, thoughts untangle, emotions settle, intentions become visible. You begin to separate what's yours from what's been projected onto you. That's where you start recognizing the difference between desire and pressure, between ambition and expectation. Solitude is where you hear your intuition again. And believe me, that voice, the one that whispers when everything else is quiet, is powerful. It tells you who to trust, what to pursue, and when to walk away. But we spend so much of our lives ignoring that voice because we're too afraid of what it might say. Solitude doesn't just help you hear it, it helps you trust it. You begin to realize that your instincts were never the problem. You were just too distracted to listen. The more time you spend in solitude, the clearer you get on who you are and what you're here to do. You stop seeking permission to dream boldly. You stop diluting your vision to fit into someone else's frame. You begin to see yourself, really see yourself, outside of the roles you've been assigned. And once that clarity comes, it's very hard to go back to pretending. We live in a culture that tells us to chase love, chase success, chase beauty, chase acceptance. From a young age, we're conditioned to believe that fulfillment lies just outside of us. If we run fast enough, work hard enough, shape ourselves the right way, maybe then we'll finally feel whole. But here's the truth no one really tells you. You don't need to chase anything. You have the power to become. The version of yourself you're looking for isn't somewhere out there. She's already inside you, waiting to be unleashed. Chasing puts you in a mindset of lack. It starts from the belief that you're not enough right now, that you need someone else to complete you, validate you, or save you. But when you stop chasing and start becoming, everything shifts. You stop hustling for love and start radiating it. You stop begging for opportunities and begin attracting them. Because when you move from a place of inner alignment instead of external need, people can feel it. They don't just see confidence, they feel presence. Becoming is an inside job. It's not performative, it's transformative. It's choosing growth over approval. It's doing the internal work no one claps for, healing your wounds, facing your patterns, owning your power. It's saying, I'm going to become the kind of person I admire whether or not anyone's watching. And that journey, quiet, sacred, sometimes lonely, is where true identity is formed. That's how you stop attracting chaos and start embodying calm. That's how you go from being reactive to intentional. The world doesn't need more people who are chasing trends, likes, or validation. It needs people who are rooted in who they are. When you shift from pursuit to presence, you stop adapting to every room you walk into. And instead, you walk in knowing you belong. You speak from truth, not fear. You show up fully, even when it's uncomfortable. Becoming is magnetic, not because it seeks attention, but because it glows with authenticity. You can feel the difference between someone who's chasing and someone who's already arrived in themselves. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't have to run yourself into the ground trying to earn what you already deserve. The love you're looking for, become it. The respect you crave, demand it from yourself first. The life you want, build it from your identity, not your insecurity. When you stop chasing and start becoming, you stop needing permission to be powerful. You just are. There's something incredibly raw about failing when no one else is around. There are no spotlights, no sympathetic applause, no hands clapping you on the back. It's just you, your mistake, and the silence that follows. And yet, that silence can be the most liberating sound you'll ever hear. Because when you fail alone, you learn how to survive without an audience. You stop performing and you start processing. There's no one to impress, no one to pretend for. Just the truth staring back at you, asking what you're going to do next. Failing in solitude is powerful because it forces you to own every part of the journey. Not just the shiny victories, but the messy middle. It's in those private failures that character is built. When no one is watching, when there's no feedback loop of praise or pity, you get to decide who you are. Are you someone who gives up or someone who grows up? Are you someone who lets shame define you or someone who turns it into fuel? The freedom lies in the fact that no one else is writing your narrative. You're doing that yourself, word by word, fall by fall. In solitude, failure becomes less about ego and more about evolution. There's no distraction to numb the sting. There's no chorus of opinions clouding your next move. You're forced to sit in the discomfort. And that's where the real alchemy happens. Because failure, when felt fully, becomes your teacher. It doesn't just show you what didn't work. It shows you who you were when it broke. It asks you to shed old habits, outdated beliefs, and false identities that were never meant to carry you forward. The beauty of failing alone is that you also get to rise on your own terms. There's no pressure to bounce back quickly or look polished while doing it. You can take your time, reinvent in private, and reemerge when you're ready, not when the world expects you to. That kind of freedom is rare. In a world obsessed with instant redemption arcs and curated recoveries, being able to fail without performing your pain is a quiet form of rebellion. You heal deeper when you don't rush the recovery just to make it look inspiring. And let's be real, the people who build resilience are the ones who faced the ground, tasted defeat, and still stood up without applause. When you failed alone and survived it, you stop fearing failure altogether. You realize it's not something to avoid. It's something to use. It sharpens you, it humbles you, and most importantly, it frees you from the illusion that failure is the opposite of success. Sometimes it's the path to it. We talk about love all the time: romantic love, family love, friendship, loyalty. But the one form of love we're rarely taught to prioritize is the one that starts with you. Self love isn't a luxury. It's not a hashtag or a bubble bath or a weekend spa trip. It's the foundation for every relationship you'll ever have. When you don't love yourself, every other form of love will feel like a rescue mission. And here's the truth: no one is coming to save you. That's your job. Loving yourself means seeing your own value, not because of what you've achieved or how you look, but simply because you exist. It's waking up and choosing to show up for yourself even on the days when you don't feel like enough. It's refusing to beg for attention, affection, or validation because you've already given yourself the approval you were waiting for from everyone else. That kind of love isn't loud, but it's unshakable. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just is. Self-love also means boundaries. It's not just about positive affirmations. It's about protecting your peace, saying no when it's uncomfortable, and walking away when something costs you your worth. It's choosing not to shrink to fit into places you've outgrown. It's recognizing that love, in its truest form, doesn't require you to betray yourself. When you truly love yourself, you stop tolerating half-love, broken loyalty, or emotional breadcrumbs. You become your own standard. This kind of love doesn't happen overnight. It takes unlearning the voices that told you had to earn your worth, or compete for affection, or stay quiet to be loved. It takes confronting your past, healing your inner child, and forgiving yourself for every time you abandoned your own needs. It's deep work, but it's the kind of work that transforms you from the inside out. And once you start doing it, you realize this is what love was always supposed to feel like: safe, steady, and yours. When self-love becomes your first love, you stop needing someone else to complete the picture. They can enhance it, yes, but they're not the painter. You are. You choose the colors. You hold the brush. And when someone walks into your life, it's not to fill a void. It's to meet you in fullness. That's the kind of love that doesn't come from fear or desperation. It comes from knowing you're already whole. Settling doesn't always look like failure. Sometimes it looks like comfort. Like, this is fine. Like, at least it's better than being alone. But deep down, we know when we're settling. We feel it in the conversations we avoid, in the gut feelings we ignore, in the silent compromises we make just to keep the peace. And more often than not, we settle not because we're content, but because we're scared. Scared of the unknown, scared of starting over, scared that maybe this is the best we'll ever get. That kind of fear is quiet, but powerful. It convinces us that playing small is safer than reaching for something more. Fear makes us choose relationships that drain us, careers that numb us, and routines that keep us from growing. It tells us that being tolerated is good enough, that being chosen by someone else matters more than choosing ourselves. But here's the thing: every time you settle out of fear, you send yourself a message that you don't believe there's something better, that you don't believe you are something better, and that belief becomes the foundation of your life. One shaky compromise at a time. We romanticize endurance. How long someone stayed, how much someone endured. But we rarely talk about the courage it takes to walk away, to leave the relationship that doesn't feel like home, to quit the job that pays well but starves your soul, to say no to a life that looks fine on the outside but feels wrong on the inside. That kind of bravery doesn't come from rebellion. It comes from self-respect. And fear will always try to silence it with logic. It will say, what if you end up alone? The real question is, what if you don't? What if alone is where you find your truth? Settling from fear makes you shrink your identity to fit into boxes that were never designed for your fire. You begin editing yourself, toning down your voice, softening your edges, avoiding your dreams, just to fit into a space that was never meant to hold your full self. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to disappear from your own life. You become a version of yourself that feels manageable to others, but unrecognizable to you. That's not safety. That's self-abandonment. You deserve a life that feels as big as your spirit, one where you're not negotiating your worth every day just to be accepted. Fear will always be there. It's human. But it doesn't have to lead the way. You don't have to make fear your compass. You get to choose differently. You get to choose bravery over comfort, truth over familiarity, freedom over approval. And every time you do, you reclaim a piece of yourself that you were never meant to give away in the first place.